Okay, so in the first two parts of this chapter, we've seen how we can kind of show stuff on screen and how we can use the ng model directive in order to achieve a two-way binding between a variable and, say, a form item, such as something like a text input box. In this tutorial, what I want to do instead is show you how to make an array, a kind of like a sort of model variable, which can automatically get updated. So I've taken here an example of a jQuery tutorial I wrote a while ago, which has both a bit of an interface here and some text to show. And essentially, it's basically an array of cars made up of makes and models, such that we've got a kind of an initial array which starts here: make, Saab, model, turbo X, etc. Make. So we've got three car objects which have each got a make and a model, and basically they're made to appear here at the beginning of the as soon as the app starts. As in the document ready, you've got a function called show paras, and show paras is an each loop in jQuery, and it just basically kind of like writes a bit of HTML into the page, and well, loops through each item in the cars array, and puts it, creates a paragraph object, puts in the make, put the model in bold, etc. And I've also got here a button here where I can add another car. So you see here, there's three cars there, and I can put in the fourth car, Suzuki Splash, and I can press the button, and now at the bottom of the page you'll see you've got a Suzuki Splash appearing as well. So it basically sort of like in order to do that, it basically adds the item to the array, and deletes the components which have got any, sorry, no, it actually then clears the text boxes and then runs the show paras thing, which goes through, loops through all the items in the array and makes them appear again here. So, I mean, and that, as you can see there, I mean, this is only using a very simple piece of code, really, just an array of objects, rather simply described. But you can see that it's in jQuery. It can be quite kind of complex and maybe slightly messy, to be honest, to actually make it appear. You can see how this kind of thing, you suddenly now see the power of Angular, because to do something like this in Angular, you can do it much more easily. So I'm going to go now, open Visual Studio Code. I've already created the module for, I've created a module called, sorry, created an app called car array, and so basically I'm going to start off. So basically we're going to do everything in the app component, the default initial component which is used. Remember, we've got the HTML, which does all our display. We've got the TypeScript file, which is the one which kind of will hold, if you like, our model, which is just this simple array of cars, and then we're going to show it how we can going to add the form to it, which will then display the items. So the first thing we can do is I'm just going to copy that array of cars, which is here. I'm just going to copy that array of cars, and I'm going to put that into our TypeScript file. So here it is in cars group. Now, this is kind of that's one thing maybe I haven't covered so much in such detail. That TypeScript is based on JavaScript, but it's more it's stricter than JavaScript, but it's also got a few things which are slightly different. Now, if you are creating a variable inside a class, and it's a kind of global variable inside the class, you basically don't give it any kind of keyword or anything. You just say like cars. Okay, that might come to you as being slightly odd, but that's how it works inside. If you're talking about a class variable, something which we're going to kind of read from outside, etc. Now, if we just want it now to show this car array, we clearly have got to kind of do some sort of iteration. We've got to go show the first one, show the second one, show the third one. And so how do we do that in HTML? This is where we get to one of the most interesting of the Angular directives, which is called ng4, which is essentially adding a property to a tag, which essentially establishes a for loop. That in the abstract that sounds a bit complicated. Let's kind of go and do it, and then you'll see that it's actually quite straightforward. So if I go to this app component.html here, I'm going to create here a div, okay, which is going to be going to contain all the content. But inside the div here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the star ng4 directive. So asterisk ng4, and then you say asterisk ng4 equals, and then here you have this term let, which is a kind of, it's just it's the word used to declare a variable in TypeScript as opposed to var. It's kind of let, and so we're going to do a for each loop essentially. So we'll just create a kind of variable, call it car of cars, okay, which is if it's in C#, you base something like or it's basically for each item in a collection essentially, and car becomes the kind of loop variable for that collection. So we go through the cars array, and each iteration of each kind of like item in that cars array, car stands for that in that particular iteration. So so what we do then here, we can just put in some code. Remember, to make it look like we previously did, we created a paragraph tag, and we say, and remember now, if we look in the code here, you see that the car object has a thing called a make and a thing called a model. So if we just say here, we use that same old double squiggly brackets, car.make. And if I remember, it was then bold for the model. So it's put in a bold tag, and I'm going to type in there, squiggly brackets, car.model. Okay. Okay. Now, so this is extremely simple at the moment. Car make, car model, and all it is doing is iterating over this array of cars. Okay. So let's see if that'll work. So file, save all. And now let's kind of look at that in our browser, and as you can see, the array appears exactly as it should. Okay, so you see there how very few lines of code and how completely non-messy that approach has been. It's a much tidier way to deal with iterating through this loop of variables here. So that's kind of a car model. But the other feature of this, the thing we showed you originally, was there was a form which had a text box where you put in the make and a text box where you can put in the model. So so above this div, let's kind of create our form. So we'll just put in the title here as per usual, h1, and put in squiggly brackets dot title. There's a squiggly bracket n, so we'll just get the title to appear there. I think it's lowercase h rather than uppercase h. Okay. So there's our title, and now we're going to put in our form. So let's do sort of input type equals text, okay, end, and then we'll do another input type equals text, and we'll end that, and then we'll put in a button, input type equals button. Okay, so that will be our. Maybe let's kind of put in some just instructions. Car make, car model. Okay. So now we showed in the previous thing that what we can do is we can associate a text box with a that's what I'm saying. We can associate a text box with a variable in the TypeScript file. So let's do that. Let's create two variables here. Let's create a variable car make, and we'll initialize it to nothing, and we'll say car model, and we'll initialize that to nothing. So let's now associate those two variables with the text boxes that the user is going to put in. And if you remember, what we do is square bracket, open ordinary bracket, and so we type in ng model, and it equals, and the name of the variable which will, if you like, shadow it or be linked, bound to it in a two-way process. So car make, and we do the same thing here with this one. ng open ng model, and that is an equals car model. Okay, so we've done the binding of those variables, and in the I can't remember if the button, how do we type in, I can't remember, if it's like, so just put in add to array, and I'm not sure that's right, to be honest. But anyway, let's have a look. Just have a look quickly now what that looks like, and it doesn't look that positive because yes, because you can't void elements do not have end tags. So the input, no, I think it's input type equals button. Maybe I need to say value or something equals value equals add to array. Okay, so I'll do that. But there is another error actually that I'll show you, which when you first see this error, I'm going to show you another error that you're definitely going to see, and you might not understand when you first see it because it's not very helpful. So I'm going to do a save here. It's going to compile successfully, but when I run it, it says can't bind to ng model since it isn't a known property of input. And the reason you get this error is because you haven't included the forms module in this project. And now the forms module is something necessary for doing these kind of bindings between form elements like text boxes and the background variables that will hold whatever value that they are putting in. So if we now go to the app module.ts, it's here we need to add those things. So if say sort of import open squiggly bracket, I think it's forms module from, and it's single open at Angular // and there you can see it, forms. Okay, now it's grey because we haven't actually used it yet, and that's also something you've got to look out for. If you see it slightly grey, you realize that you need to do something with it, and that what we need to do is add it to the imports here. So add it to the imports here, and I say browser module forms module. Okay, and that should now be kind of so I'm thinking now that is all we need. So let's kind of do a file save all again and run it again, and now we've got our form appearing. Okay, at the moment though nothing will happen because I can type in whatever I want, but there's nothing listening to this button, so nothing, so it won't add anything to my array. To listen to the button, this is also very nice, lovely kind of feature of Angular. It's just got a little thing called click. So if I go now to the HTML and I say in the button here, and I just say it's going to be open bracket click equals, and then you're going to have some sort of function which is going to do stuff. Now I'm going to say in this quote, call my function add car to array. Okay, so that's going to be my function. Okay, and so in order to do that now, I now need to add this function into my my kind of component. So let's go in here into the component here, and here we're going to just run a function. We're going to create a function called add car to array. Now, if you're used to JavaScript, you might want to suddenly decide, oh, I'm going to type in the word function. Well, in Angular, for a class kind of function, you don't bother doing it. You just type. It's more like kind of classical Java, where you just type in the name of the function and any sort of return values or something that it does. But in our case, it's going to be a kind of like a void function which doesn't take any parameters, because what we're going to be manipulating are these two variables, car make and car model, which are already set in stone here. So if we go to add car to array, open bracket, squiggly bracket. Okay, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create an object which I'll then push onto the car array. Okay, now this thing, you might find this subsequent kind of where I'm going to write this a bit kind of confusing if you haven't done TypeScript before. So it's going to be, I'm going to see a let car, and I'm going to say the car is going to be of type any. Okay, equals new object. Okay, so you might not have seen, may have only just seen let for the very first time, but you've probably never seen any if you've not done TypeScript before. It does what it says on the tin. It just basically can be anything really, and then I'm going to say that this car open square brackets make equals. Now here, notice you see we've got this variable here, car make, which is of course linked to what's ever in the first text box, ng model car make. So we don't have to really take it out of the text box because this variable will shadow whatever's in the text box. So say car open brackets make equals car make, and car and then see another kind of thing you may not have seen before. If you're referring to a class variable, it has to use the keyword of this, this this. So any variable which has a scope only of within the function needs a let. So if it's, since car is not a class variable, it's only a local variable to the function add car to array, then we use the let to declare it. But the kind of the global class variables, car make and car model, they are not declared with a let because they are global. And when we refer to them, however, in another function, we have to use the this keyword. So this car make open brackets car quote model equals this dot car model. Okay, and finally we're just going to push this object here, car, onto the array of cars. So we say, and again we have to use this because cars is a global variable of this class. So we say this dot cars dot push open bracket car. Okay, semicolon. So if I now then save that, what should happen now, if everything's going okay, is that as I refresh this, I'm going to add a car make Suzuki splash and add to array, and that still hasn't worked. So let me just see what I haven't done properly yet. Oh, there's still one thing I haven't saved. But maybe that's just the component I didn't bother to save. Let's try again. Car make Suzuki splash, add to array, and that there. Look, it's added to the array, and then either Nissan Micra. As you can see, my taste in cars definitely on the lower end of the range. But anyway, so therefore you see, I've now managed to, you see this, you've got this array to stay on the page, and as you can see, it's a much cleaner thing. Look at this. Let's go back to our stuff in jQuery, which in itself is a nice kind of improvement on JavaScript. But as you can see, there's lots of kind of tags inside code, inside things, and it's just generally messy and everything here. Whereas in Angular, as you can see, we've got a much nicer. I mean, there's our HTML. Okay, we're kind of we don't have to worry about kind of making our own loop of in the code of car models in them. We don't have to kind of intermingle our data with all these various HTML tags because they're done here in this part of the HTML. So, and it just is just generally nicer, frankly, to do in this format, this model view controller style format, as opposed to the more maybe potentially faster, but so much less maintainable, so much nicer than things. And also, as you can see here, I've separated the fundamental function from the UI. So that means now add car to array is something that we could start doing some unit tests for. Although unit tests in Angular is a whole new set of things beyond the scope of this course. But anyway, hopefully, therefore, you've seen how Angular can deal, the model view component element can deal with things like arrays.